Welcome to episode 21 of CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. This week's guest, we have Liran Tancman, CEO of Rezilion. Liran has a really unique background, having joined the military intelligence unit in Israel in a non-cyber role and then studying brain science at university. He's now on his second cybersecurity startup, having had a successful exit to PayPal in just 15 months with Cyactive. Let's dive straight in. How are you, mate?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Where are you in the world? I know you're between Israel and New York, but where are you right now?
Yeah, right now in Manhattan.
You are?
In New York. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. When did you actually sort of get a place out there?
Well, earlier this year in September, we moved with the kids, and after company, got more traction, more customers, more people to manage in the US, and I found myself living in Israel, but in a US time zone. So I figured that would be nice to work and live on the same time zone, and also be available for my family as well as my work. So that's
Yeah, nice. So how are you finding it so far? Obviously, it's slightly different to Israel.
Well, yeah, it's different. It is, but also, I've been here so many times. We have offices here in New York City.
Yeah.
And honestly, if there is plenty of everything in New York, but one of those things there is plenty of is Israeli entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So it's not like I don't feel too lonely.
Got a lot of friends there already. Well, great. Well, Liran, thanks for coming on, brother. With all my guests, I take it right back to sort of where it all began and how you got into security, mate.
Well, it's a good story. A lot of the entrepreneurs in cybersecurity, I think they have a more classic story than I have. Like many other Israelis, just like if you're American, what defines you is where you went to college. For us in Israel, it's the military. Right, there is mandatory service, and you're 18, and that's really where you become an adult, right? So I was in intelligence. Actually, didn't start in cyber, analyst, strategy, operational intelligence, strategic intelligence. Moved up the ranks, became an officer, did a few years there, and really ran strategy, operations. Things that are very relevant, by the way, today as CEO, but not necessarily cyber connected. After a few years of service, I left the military, did my BSc in brain science, worked as an analyst for a few firms, and then got called back as a civilian to help create the Israeli Cyber Command. Right, the understanding was that, like what's happening in the US at the time, that cyber is another domain, and since I know operations and know strategy, maybe it can help, and that's how I got to cyber. So I actually moved from strategy and operations to doing the same thing, strategy and operations for cyber. And that's how I got into cyber. That's where I met my co-founder, Shlomi, who was my co-founder in my first company, is also now in our second company. And I think the best story about how it all began, our first company was called Cyactive, and we were doing predictive malware detection. And, at the time, the plan was to do a PhD in brain science. And so I was consulting a little bit the Israeli government, and I was working in a laboratory, a brain science laboratory, and just got married. And I came back, and my wife said, you look pretty bored with this PhD thing. Why are you doing that? And I said, well, because one day I will do a startup that there will be a PhD. So she said, well, what are you doing now? And, we were both very young. None of us came from fortune. So it was a good time to do it before we had kids. She had a pretty stable work. And she said, okay, you're going to do your first company. Probably it's going to fail, but you'll learn something. And we started to look for ideas, right? Yeah. And I would come back home and tell her about, some algorithms I encountered in the university, in the lab, and also what things that happened today at work with the government. And I kept telling her about how we were trying to catch attackers, but they were mutating their tools, right? And then one day I came back from the lab and I told her, I saw this genetic algorithm and it can predict mutations. And a few days later, she was like, Liran, you're not very smart. And I said, why? Well, because you keep complaining about attackers mutating their tools. And you told me 2 days ago about this algorithm that can predict mutations. And maybe you can combine them. You didn't think about it. And say, you know what? That's not a bad idea. And that's how the idea for our first company, Cyactive, it was later acquired by PayPal. That's how the idea, kind of was born. And then I went to Shlomi, co-founder, with significantly more technical and hands-on than me. And he said, you know what? It could actually work. And we built the first prototype, and that's how it all began.
Amazing. And then when did the exit with PayPal, or how did that come about? Because it was quite soon that you...
Yeah, it was 15 months. It was 15 months, very quick. We raised, I guess, at the time it was seed. Now probably someone would call it pre-seed. I don't know, it was $2 million total. And 15 months later, we sold for a healthy amount. You can read in the newspapers. And really, PayPal came to us, right? Like, I think PayPal was trying, just as a spun off from eBay, and they understood that one of the reasons to use PayPal is because it's safer, right? And they wanted to have an edge on cybersecurity, just like they have an edge on, for example, fraud detection, right? And that's how they got to us.
Awesome. So 15 months, that's just insane, really, when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. There was like a crash course in entrepreneurship, everything from fundraising, building your product, doing your first sales, negotiating an M&A, selling a company, all of that kind of squeeze. That was it was pretty intense.
Well, I hope you gave your wife a cut with her coming up with the idea, basically.
Actually, she took care of that as well. She has a foundation called the BRIA Foundation. They do advocacy on women's right and gender inequality in the healthcare system. And the deal was, when we started the company, and if it works, she's going to get a cut to start this, as she did. So not only she got it, she also took care. She took care of it in advance, like in the before the company started. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I love that. Cool. So exited to PayPal. Obviously, you know Shlomi from before. What made you do another startup?
It was I learned music for many years. I was like a violin player since 6 years old to 18 years old. I was pretty good at it. And then, time came where I had to choose: am I going to be a career musician, or am I going to go to the intelligence, the military? And my violin teacher told me, being a musician is a really, really difficult career. You should only do it if you can't do anything else. Like, if it's the only thing you can imagine yourself doing. And, I went to intelligence. And I think entrepreneurship is the same thing. So, I saw my first company and I said, okay, well, can I be a corporate executive? And I found out that I'm better and enjoy more being an entrepreneur. And then I said, well, I can be a scholar. So I went to university, to get back to an advanced degree, and I got bored, right? Because when you compare it to this roller coaster, it's kind of not as exciting. And then I said, okay, I will be an investor. And then, a good investor knows that he's not an entrepreneur, he's not an executive, right? A good investor, they ask good questions, but they don't tell entrepreneurs what to do. Well, it's kind of a problem if you're an entrepreneur who likes, deciding what to do. So I was frustrated. So I, just like my violin teacher once told me, I couldn't see anything else to do. And that was, so I don't think you do it for the money, because there are better ways to make money. And I don't think you do it for the prestige, because you already have prestige, right? But I really think you do it because that's the only thing you can do, right? If you like building things, if you like building companies, then doing anything else may be difficult. And that's why I did it for the second time, because I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah, love that. People talk about like product market fit all the time, but I'm reading a book at the moment by Will Lin. He was one of the VCs at ForgePoint. He's currently in stealth at the moment, and he's got a book called The VC Field Guide, and he talks about founding team fit before product team fit. And he talks about how he looks at the different founders and the team that are the founding team. You've decided to found with somebody and what made you, obviously you knew it was going to work, but is that why you went with him again? Like, what was that? How did that decision come about?
Oh, for the first time or the second time?
The second time, yeah. So you went again with Shlomi, right? You've done the same.
Shlomi, yeah. No, it's the first time was much more of a gamble, right? Not about him, about me. I was the first, like, I think when we started our first company, it was clear Shlomi is going to be a phenomenal CTO. He's one of the most accomplished, best cybersecurity people probably in the world. And he is being, he's kind of a legend locally in Israel, and later became a cybersecurity CTO for PayPal. There's no doubt. The question was me, can I be CEO, right? I was never a CEO before. And so I think the first time was more Shlomi gambling on me than me making a bet on him. And really, when we started the company with our investors, we agreed that after 6 months, we will reevaluate if I can be a good CEO or not. And I think it's a very wise thing to do for all founders. First time, like you need to have enough like you don't let your ego play too much. You need to admit that if you're doing something for the first time, it's good to have a checkpoint. So I was an okay CEO back then, and continued. And the second time was just, it's so difficult to find people who have intact integrity, you get along with, who knows all the things you don't know, right? So with Shlomi I know tech pretty well, but he knows so much more than me. And then Shlomi also knows business. Like he's one of those people who can be with customers, ask difficult questions at the board meeting. So there was enough, we have almost we have blind trust at each other, right? Like I never ask myself, what is Shlomi doing? Like, and it's important. And it's important because it's complex world, boards, investors, etc. So you really need to be able to trust your co-founder blindly, which is the case with Shlomi. And going for this roller coaster together, it was very clear that was the case the first time. And then the second thing is that there was enough. It was a healthy combination of we were each good at their thing, but also we had a little bit of overlap, so we can talk about what we're doing, so it's not lonely, right? And that's a very rare combination, right? So if you found someone like that, who is one of the best in the world one of the best in the world in what it does, you have blind trust, and there is a healthy mix of control plus independence on each. Yeah, I mean it was. I didn't even think about it, to be honest. Just
Wow, yeah, amazing. That's definitely a golden nugget. Love that. So finding the right co-founder seems like you fell on your feet with that. Should we talk about Rezilion? Talk to me a little bit about the current startup that you're putting on. What you guys doing there, and tell me more.
Yeah. So look, the fundamental thing we believe in Rezilion that kind of led us to build this company is that way too much time is being spent on cybersecurity, and specifically on securing software, right? This is what drove us to create this company, because if you think of our previous company, we were finding problems, right? Like all the other cybersecurity companies. And when we got to PayPal, we found out, oh man, like there are too many tools, too many problems, too many things. Like, what, are we going to create more problems that no one is going to fix? So really the mission was, how do you reduce the backlog, not make it bigger? And specifically in Rezilion, what we do, we are, as I mentioned, the business of software security, securing software, which is a pretty hot topic these days, right? Software supply chain security, software bill of materials, vulnerability management, etc. And really what we do that is unique is that we give you, takes 5 minutes to deploy, you get end-to-end visibility to all the software that you have, that you're using in your development environment, that you're using in the product you're deploying, that the product you're deploying also baked. So full software bill of materials, so that the next Log4j, you can just go to your dashboard, click Log4j, and immediately see where you have it. So that's one thing, right? Very easily, without agents, you can understand what you have and where, on-prem, cloud, dev, production, IoT, full visibility. The second thing is that we not only tell you what you have, we map all the risk associated with it. So we can be a scanner, but we also plug to other scanners, right? Everything from your SAST, your SCA, your container, your infrastructure scanner, all of those scanners, we bring them in. And again, we can also be your SCA, right? So we can be your scanner, we can also bring everything to the same place. And then the one thing that really makes us unique is that we not only tell you what you have, we not only tell you what's the risk, we show you don't have to fix 85% of the problems associated, because we can tell you in runtime what's actually used, what's actually executed, what's actually exploitable versus what's theoretically there, right? So we start by showing you everything you have, then we show you don't have to fix 85% of it. And for the remaining 15%, we tell you how to fix it, what is the lowest cost fix you can do. We help you orchestrate it, creating merge requests for developers, tickets. So it's an end-to-end platform that with a fraction of the effort gives you total visibility, but then also really, really laser focus and helps you fix what matters, right? So that's how we save time.
Love that. Was how long you been going now?
3.5, soon
3.5
4 years.
Yeah. So you mentioned Log4j. So that happened as were in occupation. So did you guys get onto that pretty quickly?
Oh yeah, it's there are two things that if you think about software supply chain security, there are a few things that happened during those years that really made it a category. One is Log4j. Second is the SolarWinds bridge, right? So Log4j, yeah. So really, Log4j showed you that you need to be able to quickly identify where you have what, and also honestly, just knowing where Log4j is nice, but if you have to fix 1,000 things, it's difficult. Knowing exactly where you need to fix is also very important. Number two is SolarWinds, which exemplified that software supply chain is a source of potential not only vulnerabilities but malicious code, and you really need to be able to understand not only what you have but where it came from, what it's doing, etc. And number three was, which kind of was propelled by the two things, is the regulation, the executive order, the latest regulations, both from FDA, etc., that really made it a requirement. And we're seeing, 3 years ago, we were talking to people about S-bombs and what is this? It wasn't even called S-bomb. I mean, some people use the word, but we would call, file inventory, right?
Yeah.
Now you go to every major corporate and they're figuring out how they handle S-bomb requirements.
Yeah, nice. What's SmartFix? I was reading on your website about SmartFix.
So remember, our mission is to reduce the amount of time that is being spent on cybersecurity. And so we started by showing you what you have to fix, right? So great, now 85% of your backlog is gone, but those fixes of 15% can be pretty painful. And specifically, it can be painful for developers and for DevOps, because what happens when you upgrade a package, when you fix something, you may fix a security bug, but you actually not create problems operationally. You may break the build. You may create operational issues. So really what you want to do is you want to understand what is the smallest change you can do, the smallest upgrade, right? That is not going to break the build, but is going to resolve security vulnerabilities. And that's a smart fix.
Yeah.
A smart fix is us telling our customers not only what they have to fix, but also what is the minimal fix they have to do to get rid of those vulnerabilities that are actually exploitable, and minimizing the risk that will actually break something. And it also goes to reducing the tension between developers and security.
You mentioned like supply chain security. What do you think the future is for that? It's obviously it's everywhere at the moment, all over RSA. It's probably Black Hat again. Yeah, what's the future for it?
So it's interesting. Things that we were doing 4 years ago, now we're seeing people saying, "Oh, so we have a new innovation in the field," and we're like, "Okay, fine. Like just read the patent; it's public. You can see." But for 4 years ago, for me there are three really big things. The first one is really thinking. We call it SBOM 360. So not just vulnerabilities, but all the aspects of risk associated with software. So licensing, okay, that's another thing. Vulnerabilities, IOCs, so indication of compromise. Reputation. One thing we're adding these days to our platform is, do you have software that came from a repo where there is low security hygiene, right? And another thing we're doing, we are now also bringing your SaaS data, so your checkmarks, SonarQube, etc., into it. So really thinking about the SBOM as a way to look 360 on a specific software, understanding all the vulnerabilities. Or another thing we just added is end of life. Our using software is no longer supported. So if there is a vulnerability, you wouldn't even know, right? So really thinking 360 about the risk. So that's number one. Number two is, how do you get prioritization that is reliable? So runtime for us was a thing, but how do you do it, seamlessly? So we just launched last week. I think it's the first ever runtime agentless, right? So you get visibility to what happened in runtime as if you had an agent, right? But you don't need to have an agent. It's something that we do by basically forensic analysis post factum, right? So once the image, we take a snapshot and we can reconstruct with forensics what actually happened there. It's like, getting to the party at the end and like Sherlock Holmes reconstructing what happened in the party. So that's another part of the future, right? So one is 360, right? What is kind of, how do you get a holistic view? Number two, how do you get this view? How do you get this prioritization, right? With being minimally intrusive. So really getting much better in acquiring the runtime signals, so that you don't have to deploy things that are intrusive. And the third thing, which I think is interesting, is thinking through the business process, right? So we have detection, prioritization, remediation, right? So smart fix is a way of thinking about the future of remediation, but there are more things we could do, right? Like, can I help you? If you cannot fix a vulnerability, can I give you an interim patch that is not going to, have any operational risk, but will buy you time? So thinking of more ways to handle the risk. I think when it comes to discovery, classic software composition analysis, I think this is completely commoditized, right? I think that like just doing the scanning, right, is not interesting. What's interesting is how do I give you more context? How do I prioritize? How do I remediate better?
Love that. Amazing. Cool. What's the future of Rezilion? Are you going for acquisition again? Are we close to it?
Companies are not sold, they're acquired. It means you cannot plan for an acquisition. I advise every fellow entrepreneur not to build a company to be acquired. You build a company to serve its customers, to bring value to shareholders and to employees. And then when M&A offers are coming, you need to look at them, each of them rationally, doing your job as a CEO, maximizing returns for shareholders and stakeholders, which is a long way of saying it's like we are focused on building a company. When something comes, we judge it, right?
Love that. That's that's another golden nugget right there, Liran. Okay. Let's wrap this up. What sort of challenges do you think you're going to come up with over the next sort of through the few years? What would you think might hold you back?
So two things. First, I think there are a lot of point solutions now in software supply chain security space. There's this company doing GASL, another company doing prioritization, another company doing ASOC, another company doing ASPM, right? Like every day there's a new acronym and a new thing, but it's really one business problem. How do we know what software you use? How do you understand the risk? How do you prioritize this risk? How you remediate it at scale, right? It's one continuum. And one of the key challenges, how do you, we believe we have this end-to-end platform, detects, prioritize, remediates, right? But how do you navigate this consolidation, right? How do you navigate the fact that eventually customers need one workflow, one solution for software supply chain security? You can have many scanners, right? Again, I think the scanners are a commodity, but customers will be looking to have one kind of pipeline, one machinery to handle the problem. And I think it's a product challenge is also a go-to-market challenge, right? How do you handle the amount of noise of every day? There's like a new point solution, and you want to tell your customer it's fine. Yeah, it's very nice, but you actually already have that here, and really think about the end-to-end. The second challenge is just scaling, right? Like it's hard, and the market is the market, and it's getting. You need to do it efficiently, right? I think the kind of growth that maybe in the past was easier because you could just put money on it, and you cannot do that anymore. So efficient growth is a challenge not only for us but for everyone.
Liran, thank you so much. That was a great episode. Wish you all the best of success with Rezilion, and when I'm next out in New York, I'll give you a buzz, mate.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.